Welcome, everyone, to the podcast. Thank you so much for joining me, as always. I'm very excited to have a special guest with me today. Elyse Cathrea is here. Many of you, I'm sure, listen to her weekly on Spirit Coffee Talk. She always has so much to share. And this week, we're going to be diving a little bit deeper into the conversation with the body, with our bodies, because as I've been mentioning, our bodies are coming online big time this year. This has been a repeated message. Many of you are experiencing it in your own ways. I dove into this a lot in Cosmic Consciousness last Wednesday. So if you missed that one and you want to see that, you can purchase that at avalonspirit.com. Just let us know which month you're wanting to get. But I wanted to carry on this conversation and go a little bit deeper. Part of it for the collective, part of it for myself, but specifically with Elyse, because I think Elyse is one of the most tapped in people to the conversations with the body as the third entity. And she does a lot of that work through somatics. And I've had the experience to work with her many times, and every time has been significantly helpful. So all of that to say, Elyse, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Welcome. I'm so glad. And if you're watching us, we are matching today. We both popped on the screen and realized we were matching color. If you're not watching us and you're just listening, we both have bright blue. Or is yours more purple?
No, it's blue.
It's blue. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
It's royal blue. So
Yeah.
we're in our blue power right now, which is so funny. But anyways, okay. So diving into this topic, this came up because I texted you one day, or I voice noted you with this kind of rambling question as it was coming through my mind, and I wanted to put it out there. And the question was, when we think of mind, body, spirit, and again, if you watch Cosmic Consciousness, you're right there with me and you get what's happening. When we think of the mind, actually, let me back up. So mind, body, and spirit, each piece is an important entity within the trinity of who we are, embodied, right? We have a mind, obviously, we've got the spirit aspect, and we have the body. We often, I think, and I have made this mistake myself, consider the body to be just a vehicle rather than an entity of consciousness in its own right. And that was one of the big lessons I learned through my experience this summer being sick, was that the body is more than just the vehicle and just, sort of semi-consciousness. It actually has its own consciousness. And we can go into that idea by looking at cells and how they replicate. Like when the cell goes to replicate, it's looking at its internal environment in the cytoplasm to decide what best program it should replicate into. And it takes that information from it, and there's consciousness there. And so anyways, pondering that idea, there are times where we get really frustrated with our bodies, right? Where we're like, come on, I should be stronger. I should be faster. I should be sturdier, all these shoulds, right? And I know in my recovery, as patient as I have learned to be, I also am very much confronting my impatience of where I would want to be by now, and my body's not quite there yet. And so my rambly question to you was, is there a point in which the body can also be conscious enough to have a parameter or a boundary set by us? And what I mean by that is, well, if we use the mind for an example, and sometimes our mind can run away with us, right? If you've dealt with anxiety or what if thinking or snowballing thoughts, the mind runs away, and you have to catch the mind and kind of put a boundary there and be like, listen, mind, we're not running away with this thought. This is our reality. And you have to talk yourself backwards. So you kind of have to like parent the mind. And then I think sometimes we have to almost parent maybe parent's not the right word, but for the sake of this explanation, we have to parent the spirit in the way that sometimes we can catch ourselves spiritually bypassing human experiences because we're looking at it from the spirit level, but then we're actually doing a disharmony if we're not acknowledging the human level, right? So sometimes we have to sort of parent, for lack of a better explanation, the spirit and say, Spirit, I understand that. I know all will be well. I get that this is part of my journey. However, my human self is really struggling with A, B, or C. So then that led me to wonder, is there a point or is there a position where we can also then parent the body? If we're doing everything we can with the body, feeding it the right foods, gently moving the body, resting the body, honoring the body, and all this, and the body is still lagging, I think this is where a lot of people get frustrated in that they don't know what to do. And I was like, is there a line in somatics? Is there an energy in the consciousness somewhere where you think we can have a stern conversation with the body and be like, listen up, I'm doing everything I can for you, working this way. And what are you doing? Where are you? What's happening? So that was my, that was my question. So to dive right in, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So maybe I'll preface by saying that I think, and this is probably, an obvious statement, but everybody's journey and experience with their body is going to be so, so different. And there's a lot of rhetoric out there around like, we create all of our illness and it's all about thoughts and which I think there's a lot of cases that can be made for that. And I also think things happen. And I'm never one to say like, you have this experience of health in your body and you created it. I think that can be really harmful for people, and it can, without the right supports, it can be really misunderstood. It can create a lot of blame. It can kind of have the opposite effect. So I'm not speaking, there's a whole tangent we could go down with that. I'm not speaking to the health in the body from the perspective of like, we created this, we created this reality for ourselves. Cause I think it's just a lot more gray than that. I just believe everything is so gray. And there's very few things that are really black and white, if anything, but I'll pin that there. And I'll also say that, you and I have spoken so much about our own experiences in this. So as I'm talking about this, for me, it's like, yes, it's part of, the education that I've undertaken in the last handful of years. It's part of, the spiritual work that I've done and that we talk about. And it's part of, like the coming online of the body, in 2024 and continuing on. And there's an energetic component of it. And then there's also a very real lived experience with having a body that is challenging. So often I'm pulling from, and I know you have been, especially recently too, with your experiences, my struggles in that realm. And so to say, just so that if anybody's feeling like, oh gosh, like I don't know how I feel about this, it's with the caveat of like, that's so fair, because body struggles are so tough. Health struggles are so tough and very intricate, very nuanced, very deep. And so it can impact us in so many different ways. And speaking back to what you said about like mind, body, spirit, right? All of them tend to interact. And I know you've spoken with that around how like low you felt over certain periods of the month. And then how like spiritually your guides kind of step back and we're like letting your body tend to itself. So I guess like a long caveat short, there's so much that goes into this and we're kind of speaking from a broader perspective. And if there's anything that feels like pinchy or like, oh, I don't know how I feel about that, or it feels a little confronting, feel free to not, take what resonates and leave the rest. And, I'm happy to have further conversations about it because we're blanketing a statement, in a very individualized, very personal journey and experience that has so many layers. So all of that aside, I think what came forward when you sent me that message, and I had to listen to it a few times because I was like, oh yes, there's something here. And I very much resonated with it, with my own experience of navigating certain health things and navigating the Western medical world with more traditional Eastern medicine, we'll say, practices, with spiritual healing, with, the way that our mind interacts with our body and the nervous system and stress and all of those things. And so all of those things play a role in how our body responds to any given thing. Where I think maybe it's unfair statement to make, but I feel for myself anyways, and for a lot of people that I talk to, that it's easiest to get pissed at the body. Like we don't as often get frustrated with our mind because our mind is the thing that's like running the anxiety or the fear or the tangent that you were talking about. Spirit, we can kind of get pissed at them, but it feels third party. It can be like, you're separate of me, and you don't get it, and this human experience is hard. And it is, and it can feel kind of removed from us. But when it's our home, like it's literally the space in which we reside in this, on this earth every day, it can feel way more personal, and I think it can feel way more triggering. And I think on the flip side of that is health in our bodies can be such an entryway into meeting like the deepest parts of ourself. And I think that's why I really wanted to caveat what I was saying, because it's like we're going to talk about it as if this is like a simple thought or idea, but it's really not. Like this is work that I'm still uncovering within myself, and I've seen the dividends and the shifts in it. And it's like we meet like the deepest parts of ourselves through dis-ease, through struggles with our body, through illness. And because it's our home. It's literally our home. It's the most home of homes that we can connect with. And when our home feels like we can't access peace, like we can't access joy or happiness in it, it's like, for me, it creates this like, well, where do I go? What else what do I do? And that is such a hard place and experience to reckon with and process. So if you're experiencing that, like, know that we send you so much love in that, because we both deeply understand how hard that is. And I do this work, and like there's times where I'm like, I can't do it anymore.
Yeah.
I'm so tired. And we move through it. So with all of that, I think there, with the understanding of, we can maybe be hardest on our bodies, and we can jump to that frustration. Why isn't my body doing this? Why isn't it responding to this treatment? Why am I not losing weight? Why am I not gaining weight? Why am I not getting stronger? Why am I not able to slow down? Like all of these things. What I think the frustration is fair. And it's, as we talk about all the time on Spirit Coffee Talk, and I think I've talked about on your podcast before around emotions, is we have to meet those emotions, right? Like if we're pissed or we're frustrated or we're feeling some type of way, that's an invitation around there's a pain point here. There's something that you're feeling frustrated with. And I really actually like that you used the parenting analogy, because I think I even said that in the voice note to you back, is that we can meet that body with frustration, right? Like maybe as a child, as a parent, I don't have kids, but I have dogs. And you get frustrated with them, right? You're like, hurry up. Why aren't you? We got to go. We got to get out the door. Does that usually speed them up, or does it slow them down? Does it get the result that we're looking for? Maybe sometimes, but often not. And if it does, I would reckon that the cycle probably repeats itself, and you find yourself stuck in the same situation in a future time. I think the same thing applies with the body. If we are constantly meeting lack of momentum or movement forward in the direction that we want with frustration, we're probably going to just repeat that cycle. So there's an invitation in the first instance to support the frustration. Why do I feel frustrated here? What is the frustration? And so, to use an example, it's like, okay, well, my body's not responding quickly enough to acupuncture, or my body's not responding to the food that I'm eating, or I tried this supplement and it didn't work, even though that's what my naturopath told me to take, or my doctor told me to take, or whatever. There's that emotional frustration that is fair and valid, but yelling at it isn't going to change your body's response to the supplement. It's probably going to say, well, but this doesn't work for me. And oftentimes where that frustration piece is coming from, and there can be emotions around past experiences and thoughts and belief systems, there can also be that we're trying to tell the body to do something that just simply isn't right for it. And without that initial pause when we're noticing that frustration to kind of clear that energy or that emotion out and work with it, we're not going to get to those deeper answers. So there's more to it than I know we talked about, but maybe I'll pause there.
Hmm. No, it's great. I love where you're going with this. And I mean, I think it is about like pausing to be able to have that conversation with the body. Because I know in my experience of healing this round, like one of the big karmic lessons I learned with my body was to communicate with it more than just doing something for it, see how it responds. Like more robotic. Not that I was in tune with my body, but this is just the next level where I will open now to have conversations with my body ever since the experience I had, which I talked about in Cosmic Consciousness, in communication with it, having a conversation with the three parts of me, the mind, the spirit, and the body, and having them all share. And the body was able to share the sadness of sometimes how hard I would push it, right? Which I didn't really realize because I wasn't looking at it as that conscious, right? And so I think it is really neat to pause and have that conversation with the body because, like you said, that's where the emotions are and it needs to be expressed in some form. So, with that being said, how do you notice through somatics that people can connect into their emotions in the body? Like, how do people vary in how they kind of experience the emotion? Like, for me, this experience gave me the opportunity to converse with it. Like I literally converse with my body and
Mm-hmm.
my body talks back in language in my mind like spirit would, right?
Mm-hmm.
But before it would be more kind of subtle. So how do people like how are the ways that people can connect into the emotion with their bodies?
Mm-hmm. So one of the kind of key pieces around somatic work is to drop the story, which our brain has a hard time doing. We want to understand. We want to like have a rhetoric around why this thing is happening, why, we are having a certain experience or not, or this is connected to this or da da da. So I think the first instance or the first step after working with that initial frustration is to have a bit of a radical choice within yourself of I'm going to honor that emotion of frustration or anger, whatever it is. And then I'm going to make a radical decision to stop shooting on myself, to stop putting all of this mental anger and pressure on myself, but my body, the consciousness that is, the being that is my body. And I'm going to turn towards it and be in conversation with it. And your question is, how can that conversation take place? And I think it can take place in so many different ways. Sometimes it is a literal like conversation, but sometimes it's more of a sensation, and sometimes it's more of a maybe an expression would be the word I would want to use. And it can also be infinite. So those are just kind of the pieces I'm pulling. The first step, and this work has to come in layers because we can't go. That's why I said the caveat up front of this can be some of like the deepest depths of work within ourselves because we're challenging the safety within our home.
Mm-hmm.
And so don't dive right in to the deepest part as a first like instance. Get some support around that if that's where you're wanting to go from anybody. But one of the ways that I think, especially if we're just beginning this work, it can be really helpful is through sensation. What am I just noticing in my body? So you could close your eyes, you could take a few breaths, and you could say, okay, so I've moved through this frustration. What is it that my body, where do I notice something happening? And it doesn't have to be good, bad, a label. I'm noticing that I'm having some like tingling in my right hip. Okay, I'm just going to notice that and allow that body's wisdom, or you could say the consciousness of it, to guide you to places where you can connect to. Again, if this is early stages of that work, you want to start slow because you also have to create safety within the experience. So you can, and then you notice, okay, it feels like prickly, it feels tingly. Maybe I notice what it looks like. What color is it? And you can kind of watch it and be with it. And you can do that over time, creating a what's the word I want to use, like a conversation and you're building a connection. You're building that communication field with your body. So noticing sensations in the body. You can build on that, or you can do it separately, whereby you say to your body, what do you need? How would you want to posture yourself right now? Do you want to collapse inward and hold yourself? Would it feel good to just put my hand on that hip where I'm noticing the sensation? Do I want to like stand up and shake my arms out, and because it's making me feel really like, ugh? Do I want to like curl up in the fetal position and hold myself? Do I want to? And you don't have to ask those really specific questions, but I'm giving examples in order to be able to say like, hey, body, what do you want to do? And it might just move your hand. For me, this is often a soothing place where I'll put my hand kind of right at the base of my neck. I don't know why. I don't have a logical reason as to why that is, but this is always a place of soothing for me. Laying in the fetal position is the same thing for me. For some people, it's not. So you can invite your body to move in a certain way. You can roll around on the floor. I remember one time you talked about like starfishing, just like laying and starfishing on the floor, inviting in what's going to feel helpful in this moment for my body to do, and just breathing there and noticing how your sensations, your emotions, your feelings shift. As this work goes deeper, you start to be able to identify, maybe I'll say themes, whereby you start to understand what the body is communicating through different sensations, through different movements. Like I said, for me, whenever I need comfort, I'll find my hand. And it's not even comfort in the sense of like I'm, something bad is happening in the moment. Like sometimes I'm just like at the end of the day, I'll notice myself just sitting on the couch with my hand on my chest. And nothing's wrong in that moment. I'm just allowing it to express in the way that it needs to. So that would be the basis of this work, I would say. As you go deeper into it, and as you become more skilled at it, because it is a skill that we're relearning and rebuilding, we get into the deeper layers of work where we can start to reparent. And that's where I like the word parenting that you use, because oftentimes, and I'll speak from my own experience now, the health experiences and challenges in my body that I've been navigating over the past handful of years, when I notice the emotions and the mental, the mind, body, and spirit experience within it, they're all very interconnected. And the more my health pieces came up, the deeper I was having to go inward towards myself to look at experiences that I had as a young person, as a vulnerable person, as somebody who, was like felt a certain way, and experiences that I had throughout my life that reinforced belief systems, that reinforced experiences that I had. And all of those things take up space in the consciousness of our body, in our somas. And so going back to our original question of, can we tell the body, like, get it together?
Yeah.
Sure, we can. And it might for a short period of time, or it might try to appease, in a sense. What's happening is we're not addressing those deeper consciousness pieces that have probably been there, maybe not from like early childhood. Oftentimes we can trace them back to there, but even through later parts of our life. And so by scolding, we're not really addressing those things. And that tends to be why we can find ourselves in these cycles. Again, I'm not saying that we heal those emotional pieces and everything's perfect and the body just heals miraculously. I know that's, some people experience those things, and I don't want to negate that. But I think what we can do is heal mind, body, spirit alongside each other, and they all will become more harmonious in how that healing happens within the journey that we're meant to experience, because there is also aspects that are outside of our control and that are not necessarily just a choice point in any given moment consciously.
I love that. I love how you brought that up because that was the basis of the conversation that I was given in that pivotal moment with my body, with my mind, with the spirit, was that the three of them needed to work together,
Mhm.
right? Like they oftentimes, I think we miss bringing the body on the journey. We're very good now at opening to bringing the spirit and the mind on the journeys now. Like we're beautifully ascending in consciousness that way. It's fantastic. But that's why spirit's like 2024, bodies are coming online. You're going to see, experience, and know your body totally differently. And it's because we need to bring that third party piece to the forefront, to the table, to the conversations. And so I love how you explained listening to the body for the cues and tuning into the body for the comfort. And like those actions invite the body to be at the table.
Mhm.
And I find sometimes once you invite those or you bring in those actions, the body's ability to speak through sensation, through feeling, through energy kind of gets louder. Or
Mhm.
perhaps we notice the subtleties better. And it kind of does become easier. So then that leads me into my next question for you is, do you believe or do you feel from your experience that stress blocks the body's language or the body's ability to communicate, like cortisol, um, for example? Do you believe that blocks the body's ability to communicate?
Yeah, I think it can for sure. I mean, I'll even speak to that in my experience in the last 2 months.
Yeah.
I had spoken on Spirit Coffee Talk. My partner had a stroke early October. And, I've had ongoing kind of flaring of things happening for a while now. And as much as I was like super stressed, fatigued, exhausted, in like, especially being really attuned to my nervous system now, I'd be at the hospital and I'd be in this fight mode. Because I'm just like hyper vigilant and what's going to happen and I'm ready to. And then I'd come home and I'd just pop into freeze and I would just like on the couch and watch. I don't even know what I was watching. Nothing but everything, and just like completely zoned out. And then I would pop, and I was popping back in and out of that state because in that moment, that's all I could do. And I want to, take the moment to say with nervous system work, I think there's this idea that you have to like, you don't get affected by anything. And that's just not true. It's that we can track it easier and we can come out of it in a different way than maybe staying stuck in it for longer than we need to. And I remember at one point being like, wow, my body feels really good. Like this has not been so bad, because I was worried about like, how am I going to be able to maintain the um this all the stuff that I was having to hold with some of the health and physical pieces that have been ongoing and that I've been having to navigate, not having time for any of my appointments and the things that I would normally do to tend to the body in the way that it needs. And I had to kind of put all of that to the side. And I was like, wow, I actually feel pretty good. And then as soon as things shifted and he was doing better and things calmed down a little bit, my body was like, okay, so let's catch up on all of the
Right.
notifications that we've blocked for
Right.
the last month. Your email box is full and we
Yeah.
have a lot of things to say. And it all started to kind of come back online. And I think that adrenaline, the cortisol, like all the things, which is what it's meant to do, right? Like when we go back to the function of our nervous system, or one of the functions of our nervous system is to keep us safe, right? So if we're, fighting or fleeing, we don't have time for pain. We don't have time for, as I'm running away from this saber-toothed tiger, that oopsie, my ankle hurts because I tweaked it. Like
Yeah.
we need to get out of there to be as safe as possible. So we override a lot of those things. And I think a lot of us exist in that space day to day because stress is high. The world is a challenging place. There's a lot going on from like every layer, basically. And so that in and of itself disconnects us from our body and the messages of our body. And then we're also taught to ignore those messages. Oh, you're tired? Just keep pushing through. Oh, you're hungry? It's not time to eat yet. Oh, I remember I got shamed for yawning once, which is like a body, like in school.
Right.
It was like shame, like, oh, someone said, oh, am I boring you? I'm like, I don't know. I had mono, turns out. That's so,
Right.
excuse me. But we have a tendency to not allow or accept the body's needs. And so we grow up learning, ignore those things. Don't do the things that you're drawn to or not drawn to because the world around us knows better, which is just not true. So I think it can be a combination of things, but I definitely think that stress can really hamper our ability to connect with our bodies. But inherently, when we do this work, we're inherently starting to maybe sift through the weeds of that stress response. So it can be a twofold. You don't have to deal with all your stress before you can connect with your body. You can hand in hand walk with them.
Yeah. And I mean, my opinion, it's my personal opinion. I'd be curious what your thoughts are, but I feel like stress energy is probably one of the, if not the most silently damaging to the body. And it like silently builds up and builds up and builds up. And then all of a sudden just, blows up in some form, illness, disease, breakdown of body parts or things like that. Like I think so much comes from stressors, and it's really being wound tightly into the old narrative of what our world should be like or how we should be in the world. Kind of like you were saying, you can't even yawn because someone's going to take offense to that. I think stress is probably one of the biggest things. Would you say from a somatic perspective and your experience, that would be pretty close to it?
Yeah, I would say for sure it is, because our stress response and stress isn't inherently bad. It's the fact that we're in it constantly all the time, and our bodies don't have the time, space, ability to regulate back down to the rest and digest aspect of the nervous system that we're meant to oscillate in and out of, right? Working out is a stress. As we're talking right now, we would be in more of a sympathetic nervous system where we're like activated and we're thinking and we're like, it's not a bad thing. It's just we can't be in it all the time. And that's where we find ourselves in the world. And I think it's been normalized too. So it's silent, and then we're exhausted and we're burnt out and we're like, yeah, but this is life. Like that's kind of what we're told. And it's normal to feel like you can't function, and that we're constantly getting sick, and and then we stress about the stress. And it becomes this like cyclical thing that yeah, I think is taking a big toll on all of us, even in our spiritual sense. And I was thinking, thinking about before we spoke today, that so many people want to develop their not nervous systems, their spiritual connection and their intuition, and there's so many more people that are being called towards that, which is really beautiful. And then the question always comes like, well, how do I tell the difference between like my mind and my intuition? Or is this fear, or is it intuition? And that it can be a tough question to answer, and it can take time to move through that. And by tending to our nervous system and tending to our bodies, we start to be able to differentiate who is talking in this moment. And the body will notify us, no, this is more intuition than it is mind. And then the mind might have, like, we get into this conversation with us as that conscious soul piece, kind of like checking in with all three, being like, hey, what's going on here? And how can I decipher what I'm feeling, sensing, experiencing?
Absolutely. And that brings me back to the ability to eventually communicate with your body with like super clarity, right? Like tuning in, whether you're tuning in and feeling into your body and you can get the answers, or having the conversation, the capacity is there to communicate with the body in the way in which we would communicate with spirit. Right. And I love that so many people are communicating with spirit because they can take that same principle to the body. Now, I had kind of another like question, sort of a question. So, one of the things that spirit invited me or challenged me to do as I've been recovering in this part of my journey here was to radically change things that were needed to change. That came out funny, but radically change what is needed to change. And they said for me specifically, it was more radically changing certain narratives that I had about my body that I unconsciously had. I had no idea I had those narratives until I had that sacred conversation with my body, my mind, and my spirit. And when I let my body talk and it shared these narratives I had in my mind that I was like, I didn't even know, like, and I thought of the origins were from when I was younger and just sort of societal of what it was expected. So it was like, are you willing to radically change those narratives? And one of them that has actually been so significant for me, that might seem so small, but for me, it was huge, was allowing myself the ability to have an afternoon nap if I need. Now, I love naps, but I always figured I can nap when I'm exhausted, right? Therefore, I've earned the nap. Like, again, unconscious narrative, but it was like if I'm exhausted or I worked out really hard or this and this, then I've earned the nap and it's totally fine, right? This is going on in the background. But my body was like, hey, actually, if you realize you have done so much medical testing, you have done hormonal testing, you have like so many tests and answers now about the physicality of the body. You know that your cortisol dips a lot in the afternoon. It's naturally how it happens based on your DNA. You burn it out really fast. If you were willing to have a 20-minute nap, we could fill that right back up and you'd be good to go. And it was like this awareness of like, oh my gosh. And if you think about it, oftentimes in many places in Europe, they they embrace the afternoon siesta, right? They embrace the nap. They embrace the pause in the day, even the lunch, the extended lunch and family time for a couple hours. Then they come back to being productive. My body wants that, right? Like my body wants that pause, that real pause, not the 20-minute pause where I'm not actually pausing. I'm eating while I'm answering emails and talking to spirit on the side, which I can run happily in that energetic state because I'm doing things and I'm not upset about it. But my body needs me to not. And so I have found bringing back short naps doesn't happen every day, but most days of the week my body is so much happier and much more ease. I'm drinking less coffee, although I will enjoy my decaf, but I'm drinking less coffee. I'm feeling more in tune, better able to hear my body, all that kind of stuff. So I found a huge thing was like really coming to the table, willing to hear the body with what narratives it is asking to be released.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel that that is that radical turning towards what does the body actually want? And I think that that's a hard place to get to if we're not tending to the emotions and frustrations around it. The mental piece of like, we're feeling whatever about the body not responding in the way we want it to, because the likelihood is that, well, I don't want to say the likelihood, but in that situation, what I responded to you was, I think your mind has a different idea of what the body, what recovery for your body actually looks like. To your brain, it was, okay, well, we're going to get back to that you're hustling along each day and and doing all the things, and then you can crash in the afternoon and have a nap after you've worked really hard. That was the like the programming that your brain was running on. But in all, and so your body's like, I don't want to do that. That's not what, like, if we're healing, like, I don't, that's not how I want to heal. And so we're trying to dig in and force, square peg into a round hole, and then getting pissed off that it's not working. And that's where that radical turning towards, like, I'm going to choose to do something different here. I'm going to tend to that emotion. It's valid. It's bringing up something. And then I'm going to turn towards, what am I going to do differently this time? And allowing the conversation with the body to be what is different, not letting the mind dictate what the body should be doing. Mm-hmm. And I want to say too that we can start to get really creative in what that looks like, because I imagine people would be like, well, great, but I have to work an office job all day, and am I going to just have a nap at my desk if that's what my body wants, to use that example?
Yeah, for sure.
And the reality is that like we can get, it doesn't necessarily, so, using that analogy, there's, my body's the same way sometimes, and mine has a whole schedule on its own. Like, it really just depends how she's feeling and what she wants. And so for me, it's like, okay, maybe I don't have the space for that because I'm out of the house today, and I can't just lay down and have a nap comfortably. But maybe I can bring my headphones with me. I bring my headphones almost everywhere I go now. bring my headphones, pop in a meditation, and sit in my car with my seat heater on for like 5 minutes and just close my eyes or sit in the sun or find a quiet place in an office building. I used to go when I worked like a 9 to 5 in an office. I used to go sit in a bathroom stall and just like take a minute and
I've
have
done
like,
that too.
I'm just like, okay, it's not my, comfy, cozy bed. It's not my
Yeah.
nest chair, but like this will do just for a moment.
Yeah.
You can also offer your body those micro moments as well, even if you're not able to offer it the full expression. But then you also know, okay, where I can move towards that. We don't get towards those creative ideas of what's going to actually fill the cup back up, as they say, if we're so stuck in the emotion and the mind's idea of what the body needs, what we've been told. And that's why, like, when I work with folks around meditation and nervous system and anything, I'm never going to say to somebody, you have to do this, because your body, your mind, your system, your spirit might hate that. Just because breath work is so amazing for some people, that's very triggering to their nervous system. So we're not going to do that. It has to be this repetitive, and it has to be a repetitive conversation, and it becomes a lifelong conversation. And I will say that once you open the door to the conversation, it's real hard to close it. So once, like, now my body is so sensitive to some things, and like it screams when I'm not listening to it. And so, side, if you think it means that it'll just be easier because you don't feel the discomfort, in some cases, yes. But in another sense, you're so much more tuned into it now that discomfort becomes louder when you're not paying attention. So it is really layered work. And Spirit's just saying, like, this is why it's multi-layered as well, right? As with anything, we have to, it's almost like show the commitment to the work, which my brain even resists, because I'm like, we're doing a lot of work. We're doing a lot of things. So if that feels overwhelming to you, know that you can pick at it. It doesn't have to be this like changing everything all at once.
I think that's beautiful. I love this conversation. I think we're going to have more of these conversations too, because as we step into the power of the body, though, we become so much more powerful. Like, our body helps fuel the capacity of the mind and the spirit. Like, it's essential the body comes online with us, but the body needs to be heard first. And I love ending on the note of the mind sometimes has an idea of how the body should be, should heal, should look, should function. But it's not actually what the body wants. And so we really need to bring those three parts to the table. So I love this conversation. I think it's something that can be deeply reflected upon. And again, like, I think we can dive into this again and go deeper into the next layer in the future for sure. So thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, this has been great. So for any of you that want to work with Elyse, you can book with her at avalonspirit.com for higher self tune-ins and stuff like that. You can also connect with her on catheriacoachingandwellness.com, correct? To book any kind of somatic practices, coaching and things like that as well. I definitely recommend it. I would not be sane without this lady in my life and her knowledge. So
ditto.
About
you, not me.
Ditto you. Yes,
ditto about myself.
I am. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. Have a beautiful rest of your week, and I will see you next week.